Today we're going to look at a story of incredible luck, but more importantly, a story of incredible discipline. It's about how a small nation stared into the face of almost unimaginable wealth and chose wisdom over temptation. This is the story of Norway and the Christmas surprise that changed its destiny forever.
This right here, this single sentence, it captures the entire strategy. It's really the core difference between creating wealth that lasts for generations and digging a hole that your grandchildren will still be trying to fill. And it all started on one fateful night.
You know, before 1969, Norway was a quiet, respectable nation. A nation of fishermen and shipbuilders. They were doing all right, but they weren't rich, not by any stretch. Just a hardworking people defined by their relationship with the sea. And then, history came knocking.
So, there was this American company, Phillips Petroleum. They had spent years and a whole lot of money drilling in the North Sea. They came up with nothing. We're talking over 200 dry holes. They were frustrated, ready to pack it in. They decided to take one last shot, a real Hail Mary, at a site they were literally about to abandon. And on Christmas Eve, 1969, they hit it. And they didn't just find some oil. They found the Ekofisk field, one of the largest offshore oil basins in history. Just like that, the oil age had arrived in Norway.
Now this is where the story gets really interesting. See, most countries that hit a jackpot like this, they see easy money, a blank check. But Norway, they saw something else entirely. They saw a Goliath, a massive threat to their culture, their economy, their entire way of life. They actually understood the danger of getting rich too quickly.
The specific threat had a name, the Dutch disease. They just knew that if they flooded their small economy with billions of oil dollars, inflation would absolutely explode. Their traditional industries, things like fishing and shipbuilding, they'd become too expensive, uncompetitive. They'd just wither up and die. They were terrified that this oil would end up killing the very soul of their nation.
So they had this crucial question to answer. With the world's most powerful oil companies beating down their door, how could a small country possibly maintain control? How could they make sure this discovery would benefit their people for generations and not just line the pockets of a few foreign executives? How do you stop the puppet masters from pulling all the strings?
Well, they answered with a plan. A strategy so bold, so far-sighted, it's almost hard to believe it happened. In 1971, the Norwegian government laid down the law. They called it the 10 Oil Commandments, and it was their slingshot against the Goliath of corporate greed and economic disaster.
The commandments were simple, but they were ironclad. First, national sovereignty. The oil belonged to the Norwegian people, period. Second, the state, not private companies, would be in the driver's seat. To make sure of that, they created their own state-run oil company, Statoil, to compete and participate directly. And then came the masterstroke.
78%. Let that sink in. That was the tax rate they levied on the profits of foreign oil companies. That is not a typo. 78%. The message was crystal clear. You want to drill in our waters? Fine. But the vast majority of the profits are staying right here in Norway for the Norwegian people.
But the most radical decision, that was still to come. After they collected all this unprecedented wealth, they made a choice that just defies all modern political logic. They refused to spend it. They knew that if they started spending it, it would trigger that Dutch disease they were so afraid of. So they took all that cash, every last krone, and put it into a separate fund, completely firewalled from their domestic budget. Just think about that level of discipline.
And this really illustrates the two paths a nation can take when it comes across a valuable asset. Do you treat it like a seed, something you plant for the future, or do you treat it like collateral, something to borrow against for today? The contrast? Well, it couldn't be more stark. On one hand, you've got the Norwegian model. They took an asset, the oil, and they deliberately, consciously transformed it into an inheritance for their children and their grandchildren. On the other hand, you have the model we're probably more familiar with. You find or possess an asset, and you immediately use it as collateral to take on more and more debt.
And this is the result of that second path. The U.S. national debt is sitting at nearly $39 trillion. It's a number so large it's almost impossible to comprehend. When you look at that, the discipline of the Norwegian model seems almost like science fiction.
It all reveals a fundamental truth. How a nation manages its resources, its assets, its everything. It is, quite literally, the difference between building a sovereign kingdom that controls its own destiny and becoming a colony, forever indebted to someone else.